You're listening to XVGM Radio. Welcome to XVGM Radio, where the bits keep coming. I'm Mike.
And I'm Justin.
And this is episode 112, High Score Jamz.
Yeah. I had more to say there, and my brain just shut down.
It did. You were too busy trying to enter your name.
I was.
Yeah.
It's a pain in the butt, because it's like J and K are right next to each other, but then the S is all the way
all
up
the way,
alphabet.
Yep. I got lucky, MJL. It's boom, and then a couple over, and then two over, and then I'm done. So, yeah. Today we're talking about high score music, and when we say that, we're talking about high scores that you can acquire in a video game, and the music that plays either while you're being shown a high score, like the list of all the high scores, or when you are entering your name for a high score.
Yeah, I feel like most of these tracks are probably either going to be called high score or name entry.
Yes. Initially, while looking through the choices that were available, there is a very heavy lean towards Western composers.
Yes.
So it was very difficult to get Japanese composers for some of these with tracks that were beyond like 15 seconds. Because for whatever reason, most Japanese composers didn't want to put in high score entry music that was longer than like 15 to 30 seconds in most cases.
Yeah, no, I mean, in general, it's not even just a Japanese thing. A lot of the high score music is very brief because you're not really on that high score screen for very long.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it takes you a while to enter your name, maybe the music will loop a few times, but it's not, as important as like the boss music or the level music. But there are some real jammy tunes in here.
Yeah, we picked a lot of really neat stuff with a lot of different genres of video games. So to bring us in was a racing game, actually, from Ridge Racer Revolution. And this game came out on the PlayStation 1 in 1996. This is called the High Score Screen. And it's by Nobuhide Isayama and Hiroshi Okubo.
I've heard those names before.
Yeah, I've really struggled to find something from a Japanese composer for this intro, and I found this and was just like, oh, this is too good. I got a comment though on the 90s vocals, the R&B, like, techno, sultry, seductive,
You mean the Spice Network music going on in the background there?
Yeah. I'm waiting for somebody to be like, pick up the phone, But I gotta say, hearing this, it's so funny because it's like you're waiting for them to be like, get in the car, like we're talking about a racing game. So it's like, I don't know. I guess I see the correlation between like speed and seductive natures. I know, just going fast and being dangerous and all that. So I guess
Sonic gets all the girls.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, he does.
Yeah.
Amy Rose and
Sally
Acorn. Do we count Sally Acorn?
Of course.
We do? Okay. Because she's not in the games.
I don't care.
Oh,
she's in the story.
She's in my heart.
She's in my heart. Yeah.
She's in my heart. I haven't played this one, but I do dig the the techno jams. I don't know. I don't really have much else to say about it. It wasn't like I heard it and was like, this is amazing. I heard it and it was like, this is silly. That's kind of why I picked it. Ridge Racer has a little bit of a confusing numbering system. There was Ridge Racer, and then there was an arcade sequel that came out called Ridge Racer 2, and I believe this one is the sequel to Ridge Racer 2, but a large chunk of the music that came from Ridge Racer 2 ended up in Ridge Racer Revolution. So I almost want to say this is like the
PlayStation port, maybe?
I guess, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the gameplay is pretty much the same from the first game. They're still drifting, still, it's. I'd say it's more like Ridge Racer 2 than the first one in that aspect. But
okay.
One cool thing is that this game does support that Namco controller that they came out with. It's called the NEG Con. Have you seen that controller? It's like you can. Spin it, kind of.
Can you bop it?
You can't bop it. Yeah, no, you can't. What's bop it? What were the numbers or the names of bop it? It was like bop it, twist it, pull it.
Yep.
You can't do any of those. Yeah, no, this is just a controller that rotates. It has like a mechanic in it so that you can rotate like to go faster, I think.
Oh.
So yeah, you literally like bend it almost. It's like the controller like rotates almost like a gear almost. I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain without seeing it, but if you look up pictures of it, it's called again the NEG Con controller.
Oh,
yeah. You're looking it up now.
Yeah. No, I remember seeing this.
Yeah.
I've never touched one. I've never played with one.
Gross.
But that's why I never touched it.
Yeah, I know. Listen, I get it. I want to touch strange controllers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't know where they've been.
Yeah, true. This game does support link-up mode for 2 players. So, and you can also access some of the original Ridge Racer courses too. So
nice.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. I really like the Ridge Racer series. It's a lot of fun. It's very difficult. I have the one for the PSP. The racing in it is very difficult to advance, but it's a lot of fun and the tunes are great. So
yeah, I remember playing some of the earlier Ridge Racer games on the PlayStation 1 back in the day. I never got to do anything with a high score screen, I'll tell you that. They were fun. They're one of the handful of racing games that I did enjoy.
Ridge Racer Revolution has 2 additional secret modes that are hidden like in the game. One is called Drift Contest, and the other is called Pretty Racer. But it's if you've ever played that game Choro Q,
Nope.
It's very similar to that in the sense that like the cars are like chibi.
Oh,
they're like chibi sized, so it's kind of like Choro Q in that sense. So pretty cool. That's about it as far as like the game in and of itself goes. After Ridge Racer 2, they came out with a sequel called Rage Racer in 1996. So not a lot of time between these games, which is kind of interesting. Nobuhide Isayama has credits for 3 games: Air Combat, Ridge Racer Revolution, and Ace Combat 2. So not a lot to talk about there. Hiroshi Okubo, though, I know we've talked about before on the show. Their first game was Namco Soccer Prime Goal in 1995 on the PlayStation. And then they did a bunch of Ridge Racer stuff, like Ridge Racer Type 4, also known as R4, Mr. Driller on the Game Boy Color, R Racing Evolution rather. So they continued to work on like the Katamari series, Ridge Racer, Tekken Dark Resurrection on the PSP, Ace Combat series. You know, pretty big composer for Namco for the most part. Their latest game where they're credited is for Tekken 8, which came out this year on the PlayStation 5.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so they're still in it today.
In it to win it.
Indeed. So that's all I got for Ridge Racer Revolution, but we're going to roll right into a game that I have pretty fond memories of, and I know we've talked about it on the show before. I think we talked about it on the X-Men episode that we did with Carlos.
I believe so.
Yeah. So this is Spider-Man X-Men Arcade's Revenge. This came out on the Super NES and the Sega Genesis in 1992. Specifically, this is the Super NES version. High Score Table is the name of this track, and it's by Jeff Fallon and Tim Fallon. Hey, thanks for joining us back on our High Score Jamz episode. That track that we just heard was from Spider-Man X-Men Arcade's Revenge. That came out on Super NES in 1992, and that was High Score Table by Jeff Fallon and Tim Fallon, two masters of VGM for sure.
Yeah, super funky.
Yeah, I mean, most of the stuff on this soundtrack was very funk inspired, but also very like progressive rock, classic rock, you know, from the 70s. A lot of the stuff that they were doing kind of sounded a little bit like porn music from back in the day, you know what I mean? Like that old school.
It could a little bit, yeah.
You know, that waka chicka waka, you know, like Barry White kind of.
Man, the first song sounded like something off the Spice Network. This sounds like 70s porn.
Yeah.
We're really starting off strong with the innuendo.
I know. I might even go in your
No.
Ayo.
That's it. I quit.
All right. I mean, I played a ton of this game back in the day. It was a struggle to beat it. I don't even know if I beat it as a kid. I may have beaten it like later on, like in my youth or maybe my 20s or something like that. It's a great game.
Yeah. I think I've only ever played the Genesis version, and for a little bit, I don't have much in the way of memory of this game. I did like this track.
To clarify, it is not a great game. It is a fun game for its time and growing up with it. So I may be blinded a little bit nostalgia goggles wise by it, but I really enjoyed it.
It's hard to argue with the composers on this one.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing, and they do it really well.
Mm-hmm.
Some might even say they're the best they are, the best there is at what they do.
Yeah.
But that guitar moving between the right and left channels was a lot of fun. Added a lot of extra movement to the piece, or maybe it was just me moving around. Mm-hmm. The bass that comes in every so often, not what I would call buzzy, but fuzzy. Like when it becomes a little bit more prominent, it's got what to me feels like a fuzzy quality. Like,
okay.
Makes me a little bit warm inside.
Yeah.
And then like those synthy arpeggios that happen on and off are just a lot of fun too. Like I didn't notice them till like the last half, but really, really cool. I mean, I don't think there's anything by either of the Fallens that I haven't enjoyed.
True.
So it's kind of a gimme there. But man, just a lot to take in.
There's a lot of really cool panning effects back and forth, as you mentioned. But I like the spacey effects here. The kind of wishy-washy, like
the white noise?
Yeah, almost like white noise in a way. Fallens have been doing that for a long time. I mean, even going back to like the ZX Spectrum, like, the Amstrad CPC, and stuff like the Commodore 64, the like swirling sound effects that are kind of present in the background really kind of gives it a unique flavor throughout this entire track. But this one does kind of repeat. It's a little short. But again, it's not meant to be hung on for forever. But a lot of these Western composers came from a time where you would have a track that would just hang for a long time. Like you'd have a 6-minute loop of one song, and it would be like everything. You know what I mean? It would be the title theme. It would be the level theme. It would be the high score theme. Yeah. It would be everything. So
it's one of the other things that made it hard to find some high score themes when that's the case. So.
True. But in this game, I mean, we've talked about it on episode 93 with Carlos, so I won't talk too much about it, but the basic premise is you are playing as both Spider-Man and the X-Men, where you get to choose from Cyclops, Storm, Gambit, and Wolverine. And you get to choose between them as well as Spider-Man to try to defeat Arcade, who has captured the X-Men. And Spider-Man kind of saves them or rescues them. But then, now he's trapped, and now you all have to fight Arcade in his wacky wonderland. So, yeah. It's especially good on the Super Nintendo, not so much on the Genesis. The tracks aren't bad. They
sound definitely different.
They sound different mostly because, I mean, I've heard the Fallens do stuff on the Genesis, at least Tim, like Time Tracks, for example, which was unreleased. And it's not bad. It's just, I think my biggest issue is the instrumentation on the Super NES was just that much better than on the Genesis, meaning the instruments themselves would stand out more individually on the Super Nintendo. And I think Tim really utilized that Tim and Jeff utilized that here to really improve the soundtrack over the Genesis version in that sense. So same compositions, just night and day in terms of sound quality. So Jeff Fallen, I don't think we talked too much about Jeff Fallen on this show, but Silver Surfer and Wolverine were two standouts from them. Games like Tom and Jerry on the NES, Rock and Roll Racing on the Super Nintendo did audio programming on that. Plock, they did music on for Super NES. Continued working up until 1995. Batman Forever is their final credit for game music, which that's a rough one to go out on. Rough. Tim Fallen, who we've talked about quite a few times on this show. I don't know. He has a lot of credits, starting off with Subterranean Striker on the ZX Spectrum. Continued working on the ZX Spectrum and then bounced around to the Commodore 64 with games like Sky Shark. We already mentioned games like Ghouls and Ghosts. Target Renegade in 1990 on the NES. Puzznick on the Amiga. Pictionary. Great soundtrack on that. Games like Incredible Crash Dummies on the Game Boy and the Master System. Plock getting a credit with his brother. And then did a bunch of licensed stuff like Starsky and Hutch on the GameCube and the PS2. Future Tactics, The Uprising, which came out for a bunch of stuff back in 2004, like GameCube, Xbox, PS2, Windows. Then their latest game for sound, for music, was Lemmings in 2018, which came out on the Android, which was ported over from the iPhone from the previous year. So they did music composition for that. I believe that might be a port of the 2006 PSP game. So they've kind of come a long way. I would love to hear more by Tim Follin, but I think he's mostly retired. He did do some work on a game called Contradiction back in 2015, but only as a writer. So, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. All right. So now we're moving on to a different Western composer. What do you got?
Yeah. So this is going to be a Amiga game from 1988 called Leatherneck. The track is, of course, called High Score, and the composer is David Whittaker. Okay, that was High Score from Leatherneck, the 1988 game on the Amiga composed by David Whittaker. So I gotta say, this is kind of close to what I think about or what I hear in my head when I normally think of high score jams.
Okay.
Probably won't be after we finish this episode, but the reason I say that is, when we first kind of talked about doing a high score jams episode, I think I was a little bit hesitant at first because I was just like, really, high score jam? Like, I know that there are some good high score jams as presented by the episode of Pixel Tunes that I did with you and Nico when Nico had that unreleased Green Lantern high score track by...
I think that was the catalyst for this whole thing, wasn't
it? Yes,
I
think it was.
Yeah.
And so when it was first brought up, I was like, and then I remembered that, and I was like, okay, there's got to be more like that out there. But generally, when I think of high score music, I think of something, not to say that this is forgettable, I actually really enjoy this, but the music is usually a shorter loop or it's not really what you remember from the game, because what you tend to remember is the more exciting stuff.
Yeah.
And this is very kind of low key. Like, it's probably not the most low key thing we have on here, but it's kind of relaxing. It doesn't get too fast. It doesn't get too complicated.
Yeah.
But what it does do is it plays with those Amiga sounds in a way that I really enjoy. Like, it arpeggiates a lot of the notes very quickly. You get kind of that that kind of feel from them, and it just kind of moves along in a very lackadaisical way.
I got a very 50s kind of vibe from this one.
Oh.
I think it was like the dun 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 dun. It almost felt like a milkshake sock hop kind of vibe. Like you're hanging out, listening to the jukebox, and maybe this ballad comes on, waiting for somebody to come in and be like, "Oh, darling, please." That sort of thing.
Okay.
That's the vibe that I got from this track. It's very much like a "you did it, congratulations" kind of vibe too. So a little bit laid back, a little carefree. I definitely felt a strong sense of piano here mixed with maybe like a jittery kind of bass. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I definitely did not get that at first, but now that you've explained it and given some like context, I can see it. I can see it.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, so this game, I've
tell me about this one.
Never heard of it. I've never played an Amiga, so anything on the Amiga is going to be new to me.
Sure.
I've discovered as we've been doing this podcast that I really like the sounds of the Amiga and the Commodore 64, so I wanted to find something that was interesting. But Leatherneck is basically like Ikari Warriors type of a game.
Okay.
It's a vertically scrolling. It's not really a shoot 'em up.
Like Commando.
Run and gun. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks a lot like a top-down Commando or, as you said, Ikari Warriors. Yeah, very similar.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this is there was a joystick interface from Microdeal. In some way, you can get 4 players simultaneously on the screen.
Oh, wow.
And Ikari Warriors was only ever 2 at a time.
Right.
And same with whatever the other game was that was like that. Was it Guerrilla War?
Guerrilla War, I think, was also top down. Yeah.
I remember those games were very, very similar. And
they were all really popular up until Contra came out.
Yes.
And once Contra came out,
it was all about the side scroll.
That sealed the deal. It became top down was boring at that point. People just wanted side scrolling.
Yeah. Then the other thing that I will say is I think this actually looks better than Ikari Warriors or Guerrilla War. The graphics themselves, there seems to be more detail in it.
Sure.
So what I see is, you've got the main screen, which is a little bit smaller than you would normally have, because on the right-hand side, you've got each of the 4 players and their status or their weapons or something. So your play area is a little bit smaller, but the detail on screen from the ground, the rocks, the buildings looks to be a little bit better than what I remember in Ikari Warriors. So.
Yeah. That makes sense because they probably use the additional, because all the space in behind where the players are, like where the player information is all black. So they probably took advantage of that additional screen and memory to draw better or more detailed graphics on the actual play area.
Yeah,
so that checks out.
Yeah, but looks neat. If I ever get a chance to play this or to play something like this on the Amiga, I'll have to give it a try because it looks pretty fun. Other than that, the reviews and a lot of things that I see talking about it seem to make it a pretty standard game of its type. The thing that makes it more interesting is that there weren't a lot of these type of games on the Amiga.
Sure.
So it stands out from the rest because it's a little bit unique for the system.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, and then we're going to talk about David Whittaker. This man has so much credits, so many credits.
Yeah.
I'm just going to start with the beginning of their music and sound effects career was uncredited on Deathwake in 1985. Came out in the ZX Spectrum, Commodore 64, Amstrad CPC. And I don't even know where to go from here, I'll be honest. They did music and sound effects, again, uncredited for Max Headroom in 1986.
Which is based on the show, I guess?
Was it a show or a movie? Yeah, it was a show, yeah. Contra in 1987, it looks like they did the music for the Commodore 64 version.
Oh, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, which, makes sense considering what they're doing here, the similar sound style. As well in 1987 for the ZX Spectrum port.
Okay.
So it looks like they did a lot of the ports of Contra, which is kind of neat.
Cool.
They did music for NHL 96 on the Genesis. In 1996, what a surprise. As well, Madden NFL 98 in 1997 and 98 on Windows, and the N64. Yeah, N64 is Madden NFL 99.
Okay.
And we get closer to the top here. They were still doing work as of 2021. They were head of audio on Lego Marvel Superheroes.
Oh.
Looks like their last music and sound effects credit was Lego Star Wars The Complete Saga in 2013 on the iPhone.
So pretty much just relegated right now to being like a project lead or director.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because, you compose for so long, you become an expert at it, and
you tell other people how to do it,
Yeah, you eventually, tell other people how to do it. So, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it looks like they're kind of attached to the Lego side of things. I see a lot of Lego Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Harry Potter, Pirates of the Caribbean.
Do they work for Traveler's Tales?
Sure.
They must work for Traveler's Tales because a lot of those games, I think, are made by, I think it's Traveler's Tales.
Developer Traveler's Tales UK.
Yep. So that checks out. Cool.
Neat.
Nice. All right. So we're going to continue this Western journey with a game called Gods. Now, this game got ported to a bunch of different stuff like the Amiga, but we're going to focus on the Genesis version of the game's soundtrack. This came out in 1992, and this track is called High Score Tune. And we'll talk a little bit about the composers when we come back. It's a little confusing, so we'll go over it. But all you need to know is Richard Joseph, John Fox, also known as Nation 12, and Jason Page. So here we go. Oh man, that was a little track called High Score Tune from the game Gods. This came out on the Sega Genesis in 1992 for this version of the song that we listened to. And this is credited to a few people. Richard Joseph, who I believe was just programming and sound production for this. The compositions were primarily done by John Fox, who we'll talk quite a bit about. He's also credited as Nation 12. And Jason Page did the quote-unquote Mega Drive conversion, which was very confusing. I haven't heard the Mega Drive version of this game, so I don't know if the songs are slower because it's 50 hertz.
Oh.
That's what I was thinking.
I was like, how do you convert from the Genesis to the Mega Drive?
Right.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. I think it's something to do with the 50 hertz thing. Fair. Because music is slower in that aspect. So yeah, I'm thinking that's what it is. Again, I don't know, so whoever wants to correct me, feel free. But this is a game where you play as Hercules, and you are basically given a task by the gods to quest for immortality, and you can do it by basically completing the tasks that they give you. Mm-hmm. So it's an action side-scrolling kind of brawler platformer kind of game. What's really cool about this game, though, is that there was some pretty advanced AI in it where the game would kind of balance itself in terms of difficulty based on how you were doing in the game. So if you were tanking and sucking and doing awful, you would get way more health and stuff like that, and lives and one-ups and whatnot. But if you were like blowing the game out the water, then like the difficulty would like adjust. So yeah, it's pretty neat.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
But this track,
fairly
interesting.
What did you think about this one?
Fairly interesting.
Yeah.
A couple of things. Like I thought the drums were really clean and punchy. I was actually kind of taken aback at first just by the way that they sound, because that's not what I was expecting to hear off of this type of a track. I really enjoyed the bass line that they had run throughout. I thought it was really groovy, but I gotta say I was not really a fan of the quote-unquote horns. They just I won't say they sounded twarpy, because I don't really think they did, but they did not sound a way that I thoroughly enjoyed. Like, I didn't take my headphones off. I didn't hate the song.
Sure.
But I was just like, oh, okay, that was a choice.
When it comes to orchestral, there are very, very few composers that do orchestral right on the Genesis.
And this guy's not one of them. No, sorry. I'm just...
It's not bad. I didn't really necessarily think of horns when I heard it, so it's interesting that you mentioned that. I thought of it more as like keys, like keyboard almost.
Towards the end,
you know,
there was an instrument that definitely came off as keys.
Yeah.
Most of what I heard throughout most of the songs sounded either like horns or maybe like some kind of a stringed instrument, just because of like the warping effect that they had in there, like the bends. Like, you don't really, I mean, I guess you could do that on a trombone, but
sure.
I don't think these were trombones.
No, yeah. But I really liked the bass line here. And, it's very chunky, very fat, nice tone to it, and very rich sounding. So I thought it was cool. It's not quite as like slap bassy or anything like that. It's more just like a chunky, fat, tone. So
very appealing.
Yeah, I was digging it. I believe I've played this one very, very briefly. It's better known for a track called Into the Wonderful, which is in the game as well. I think it's not in the newer port that came out, from what I understand. This game got ported as like a Gods remastered onto like the Switch and a bunch of other newer systems. But I think they took out the tracks that were featured that were by John Fox.
Oh.
Like a lot of them.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. So I don't know what they replaced it with or what they did with it, but I believe that at the very least Into the Wonderful is not available in it, which that was like the most well-known song. To touch on John Fox, he is a European musician, artist. You may know them from Ultravox, which was a new wave band, and then they ended up doing a solo career, and they've done a lot of different stuff over the years. But yeah, primarily known as Ultravox, or with a band called Ultravox back in the mid to late 70s. When they started their solo career, that's the time where they were working in the 90s under the moniker Nation 12, and that produced two different 12-inch singles. One is called Remember, and the other is called Electrofear. But what ended up happening was they started working with the Bitmap Brothers and working on some of their computer games like Speedball 2, and of course this game, Gods. And that's where we got Into the Wonderful from for that track. He also worked with like LFO as well, which...
No, it's spelled LMFAO.
No. Bad, Justin. No cookie.
Well, I'm sorry for party rocking.
So yeah, he's done a lot over the years. I'm not going to get too much into it because that's pretty much the end of his gaming credits for the most part. I think he was credited for one other thing, but yeah, that's pretty much what he's well known for, is Into the Wonderful, at least in the gaming circles. So Jason Page is credited for, again, one of the people who worked on the Genesis version of the music. They've gotten a lot of special thanks over the years, but as far as audio credits go, their first one was Orion on the C64 in 1988. They worked on all the different like European consoles, like the Atari ST, the Amiga, the Commodore 64, DOS, all that sort of stuff. And then they moved on to the Genesis with their first title being Outlander in 1992. And then just continued working on various different Sega-based stuff, games like Superman the Man of Steel, which came out in the Master System and the Game Gear. Games like Rise of the Robots, which came out in the 3DO, Genesis, and DOS. And all sorts of stuff like that. They continued working throughout the 2000s up until about 2007, where they did Sensible World of Soccer 96, 97. I don't know why that's credited in 2007, but I think it is a port of an old game put onto a new game. I suspect. I could be wrong about that. It worked on Gran Turismo 3 back in 2001, Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec specifically. Their newest game is the 2023 release for Pixel Junk Scrappers Deluxe, where they did music on that game.
Oh.
Yeah. Richard Joseph credited for the Mega Drive version of this title. Again, very confusing, but again, tons and tons of credits for stuff going all the way back to 1986 with Rad Warrior on the ZX Spectrum, the Amstrad CPC, and the Commodore 64. Worked on games like Death Sword on the Amstrad CPC and the ZX Spectrum, Axe of Rage, James Pond. Worked on some of the James Pond games. James Pond 2, codenamed Robocod, which we talked about on the winter episode that we did with Radio Sega.
Yes, that's what it was.
Mm-hmm. And so they continued working throughout the 90s, and their latest game they were credited for was sound effects on Putty Squad, which came out on the Amiga. I guess it's a newer game that got released on the Amiga, so it's kind of neat. Before that, though, was 2013's Soldiers of Fortune. So that's all I have for them.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, then we're going to break this Western composer streak and have a brief Eastern composer streak.
Sounds good.
Yeah, we're going to go on with Dangerous Seed. This was an arcade game from 1989. The title of this track is Name Entry, and it was composed by Yoshinori Nagumo.
You're listening to XVGM Radio.
Welcome back. That was Name Entry from Dangerous Seed, the 1989 arcade game composed by Yoshinori Nagumo.
Oh, man. I have a lot to say about this one, so this will be interesting to talk about. First off, let me get your thoughts. What do you think about this one?
I've never heard this before in my life. What
never?
are you talking about? No.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, you picked it.
Yeah, no, I know. Sight unseen. No.
Yeah.
Sound unheard.
A blind listen.
Yeah, right. No, I enjoyed this one. So like my first pick, this is another one that is kind of a classic feeling name entry or high score track to me.
Okay.
It gives kind of a mix of like melancholy and like soaring, because it shifts between these two feelings to me. Like the opening, the dun, dun, like it is very, it feels a bit melancholy because you don't really know what's going, and then it gets into this more soaring part, and then it kind of comes back, and it just shifts between those, and it's very, very simple. There's a few things going on that I enjoy. Like I kind of like the twinkly keys that they've got going on there, but other than that, like it is a slightly slower version of, I think, the intro theme, and that's what I feel like a lot of high score or name entry tracks did. Like if they weren't kind of copying or riffing off of the main theme and just like a little bit more low key, then usually they're doing something else that was just low key.
Yeah. I mean, at least especially as far as like Eastern composers go, for sure. Yeah. This one, I don't know, this struck me as odd because the first time you played it, I was like, I was struggling to get a handle on the tempo initially. And then it kind of adjusted in my brain, and I was like, okay, I got it now. Like it kind of sounds like something that came from like a Rambo movie.
Yeah.
You know, like the end of a Rambo movie. You know, with the da da da.
Yeah.
Da 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 da. So I thought that was pretty cool. I gotta say, those synths are terrible, though. Very light, very fluffy and twarmpy. You know, just blah, 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 blah. There's like not a lot of emotions. There's not a lot of percussion in here either. It just kind of overall sounds really flat, you know? So I wasn't really feeling this one. Then we did some digging because I was looking up at the game. I was like, okay, it's like a shmup.
Yeah, it's a vertically scrolling shoot 'em up.
Yeah, and then it turns out there's a Mega Drive version of the game, so I guess it only got ported to, I'm assuming, Japan. And looking over that, we realized, oh, it's got a soundtrack. Oh, and the soundtrack's, you know, slightly different in terms of like where the tracks are.
Right. We couldn't find a name entry or high score track in the Mega Drive version.
Right. But we did find it as the stage 1 intro.
Right.
And oh man, it's so much better on the Genesis.
It feels a lot more full.
Yes. All the instruments that you would normally hear on the Genesis are there, and they really compensate. It's like when you hear Midnight Resistance and you hear Hitoshi Sakimoto's version of Midnight Resistance on the Genesis, and then you compare it to the arcade version. It's like, ugh, like the Genesis version's so much better. And it's same here. Like the Genesis version of this song, and really this entire soundtrack is really good on the Sega Genesis, or rather the Mega Drive. So yeah. That's a bummer.
I can't argue with that. Like we said, we were doing specifically high score jams, and as there's nothing called high score, so I mean, it's possible that intro track was also used for the high score.
True.
I will say it was a little bit faster, not by much, but it was definitely a little bit faster than what we heard here.
Yeah.
And if they also use that for the high score, then we kind of missed out because there's no way to actually know unless we've played the game.
Right. Exactly.
So
yeah,
it's why I didn't go in that direction.
No, I hear you. I mean, but it's still an interesting track to discuss and compare. So
agreed.
Cool.
So this game, as we said, is a vertically scrolling shoot 'em up, and you control a fleet of ships, Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. So you're trying to wipe out an alien race known as the Dangerous Seed, the eponymous Dangerous Seed, before they destroy all of mankind.
Okay.
So each of the ships has different types of attacks. So the Alpha ship has a standard shot, the Beta ship has a V-shaped laser, and Gamma has the ability to shoot forwards and backwards.
Oh, cool.
Kind of like Gradius, except not side-scrolling.
Yeah.
They each have a health meter that you take damage when you take fire. If one of the ships is destroyed, it causes you to switch over to the next ship.
Okay.
So it's not like one ship blows up and that's it. So you don't have to like focus on swapping out, which is good because like that's a game mechanic that I've seen in a lot of other games that I don't really like. Like if you have multiple things that you're controlling and you die as one of them, then like move me on to the next one.
Right.
So it's pretty neat. I've not played it, as I mentioned. I don't think I've really played anything quite like it. But it sounds interesting. It did not get great reviews.
No.
I mean, above 50% at least, but most of them are like between like 50 and 75%. Most of it seems like it just didn't really stand out among the other shooters that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, the Genesis in particular had a ton of shooters, so that makes sense. Yeah. So, and arcades too. I mean, arcades had a bevy of shooters as well. It's kind of hard to stand out in the crowd if you make a game that's kind of meh.
Right.
Yeah,
That's true. And then Yoshinori Nagumo just has a handful of credits here. This was their first music composition, as far as I see. They also did music in Wonder Momo in 1989 for the TurboGrafx. They did, and the last music credit I see here is Ultrabox 6 Go on the TurboGrafx CD in 1992.
Cool.
Yeah.
Looks like we are getting a phone call, and it appears to be on our Patreon hotline.
Ooh, I like those.
Yeah, definitely. Let's go ahead and take a listen. Janine, can you filter that through for us, please?
XVGM Radio. Who is this, and what can we play for you?
Hey, this is Ryan. I had a Game Boy growing up, and probably the game I played more than any of the others, more than Link's Awakening, more than Super Mario Land, was actually Kirby's Pinball Land. So can you guys play High Score Entry? Thanks.
Anytime. Yeah. Thanks so much for calling in, Ryan. And we'll be glad to play your Kirby's Pinball Land track. This came out on the Game Boy in 1993. This is High Score Entry, and it's by Tadashi Ikegami. Hey, thanks for joining us back on XVGM Radio's episode 112, High Score Jams. That was Ryan McPherson, our patron pick. Kirby's Pinball Land, the Game Boy game that came out in 1993. High Score Entry is the name of the track that Ryan picked, and that was by Tadashi Ikegami.
This was fun.
Yeah.
This was very bright.
Very cheery.
Very upbeat, kind of in contrast to a lot of the other stuff. I mean, the Amiga track was a bit bright, but this felt very, very Kirby.
Yes.
I appreciate this track. Thank you, Ryan, for the suggestion.
Yeah.
A breath of fresh air. Very, very cheery, like Kirby.
Yeah, I agree. And this is right in the middle of the show. So it was a nice palate cleanser from some of the other European stuff and some of the other stuff that we've been hearing. Mm-hmm. So I really dug this.
Yeah, and another Eastern composer, continuing our Eastern composer block.
Yes, yeah. This was fun, and from the looks of the game itself, the game looks really fun as well, where you're playing as Kirby, basically, as a little pinball, and it's a pinball game, so it's cool. I will say, we were Googling this game, and found some photos from the American commercial, the North American commercial, and we had to watch it. So we ended up watching all 3 of the commercials that were out, the North American, the European, and the Japanese one. And the North American one had this terrifying Kirby with these beady, creepy eyes, and your explanation of what you think it came from or referenced was perfect. What did you say again?
Yeah, it reminded me of the claymation of like Penny from Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Yeah, that's spot on. Yeah.
Very, very weird.
Yeah.
Like, it was funny, in the stills, it just looked like bad CG.
Yes.
But in practice, like watching the commercials, like, okay, it doesn't look as bad. Now it just looks like weird claymation.
Yeah, the still photographs of the low grain image ripped from the commercial just looked like nightmare fuel. Mm-hmm. It was horrifying. But then the European commercial was even weirder.
Specifically, that was the UK version.
Yeah.
The UK
oh, that
commercial.
True. It was a British talk show host interviewing Kirby, and Kirby was like this textured balloon. It's almost as if they made a Kirby-shaped balloon and then like animated a cheap cartoon face.
I think that's exactly what they did, honestly.
I think so, yeah. Because the balloon itself looked real.
Yeah.
But like Kirby's face was not. Yeah. And then like he tries to eat the co-host, and it's
because the co-host is kind of being a jerk and like doesn't know who he is and doesn't care about video games and stuff. So then he gets the part like, oh, and I hear you swallow your enemies whole and then crush them and spit them, and then he starts to like try and suck the host in. It was very strange,
very bizarre.
And then the Japanese one was like the most normal out of the 3, which never happens because Japanese commercials are insane usually.
Yeah, true. There was some really impressive CG for back in the day that was used on like this 25-second or 30-second Kirby Pinball Land commercial. So that was kind of neat to watch. But yeah, pretty wild. Anyways, yeah, that's Kirby, the Kirby's Pinball Land. I don't have much to say about it because I haven't played it, but it's basically...
It's a pinball game
with Kirby.
Kirby is the ball.
Yeah, and that's really all you need to know. Tadashi Ikegami, though, is a longtime composer, starting back on Wario's Woods, doing the NES and Super NES ports for that game. Now, sound composition on Kirby's Dream Land 2 went to him as well. In addition to Super Smash Bros. Melee, they were doing composition on that. Continued doing most of the Kirby games up until fairly recently. They did Kirby's Nightmare in Dreamland, which is a remake of the Kirby Adventure game on the NES. Kirby's Air Ride on the GameCube, Kirby Canvas Curse, and Squeak Squad, Epic Yarn on the Wii, Super Kirby Clash in 2019 on the Switch, and their latest game, they did the main theme song, Welcome to the New World, on Kirby and the Forgotten Land in 2022 on the Switch. Kind of like a Kirby composer for the most part, working pretty hand in hand with Nintendo. So that's all I got for that. Let's move on to your next pick, and it's definitely from a game you've never played before. Right.
I actually hadn't heard about this game until we started doing this episode.
Yeah.
So this is Gradius 3, one of my all-time favorite games. This came out in the SNES in 1990. The track is called King of Kings, and the composers on this were Kazuki Muraoka, Kazuhiko Udahara, Harumi Ueko, and Yuki Morimoto. Okay, thank you for sticking around for our High Score Jams episode. That was Gradius 3, the SNES game from 1990. The track was King of Kings, and the composers on that were Kazuki Muraoka, Kazuhiko Urahara, Harumi Ueko, and Yuki Morimoto.
Yes.
Oh, man. So I think I mentioned earlier, like, I'm not familiar with a lot of high score music because I didn't really get high scores often. This is one that I am very familiar with because I played the heck out of this game as a kid.
Yes.
And I mean, to be fair, even in this game, you didn't necessarily need to get super, super high scores to be on the high score list. Like, I had the game, I played it so much that, eventually I just got good enough to be able to enter my name. I don't remember if I ever really got the top spot.
I was going to say, did you ever get any, like, really high scores in a game?
So that's the one thing that I am concerned about with this episode, and we haven't gotten to talking about anything yet. I don't remember scores.
Okay.
Like, I cannot remember any time playing a game and going like, oh my God, I can't believe I got this super high score of 5,251,809.
You got 500,000 on Double Dragon? Or whatever the joke is,
So
or 50,000. Is it 50,000? I think it's 50,000.
Yeah.
Quoting the movie The Wizard.
Oh, yes. That's the thing. Like, outside of like funny scores, I just I was aware of scores in game, but I never got a score that I was proud of to the point where I was like, oh man, I'm gonna remember this forever. So like I don't really have any like high score memories to talk about. For this game, I know that I've heard this song a lot, and I remember being able to enter my initials in the screen, particularly because this game, it wasn't just your initials. You'd enter your initials, and then you'd enter your astrological sign.
Oh, cool.
And this is actually the game. I didn't know what astrology and astrological signs were until this game, because it was just like, pick your sign. And I was like, what? And I would just like pick a picture that looked cool.
Right.
I think it was usually like Pisces or maybe Taurus.
Okay.
But I'm a Gemini. And once I learned what that was, and I learned like the Gemini sign in this game looked like a Roman numeral 2, basically.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's boring. It doesn't look cool. So I would just pick whatever picture I liked that looked cool.
How'd you discover that one where you're like, Mom, what is this? Like,
no, it was, probably the newspaper. Because when I was a kid, I used to love grabbing the comic section and reading the comics, and the horoscopes were near the comics. So I remember one day I was reading comics, and then I saw the horoscopes, and they had the little pictures for each of the symbols, and I was like, oh, and they didn't look exactly like they look in Gradius, but enough of them were similar that I was like, oh, and then I was able to kind of eventually figure it out.
Okay.
And, I mean, the internet I couldn't go to Google and Google search Gemini or astrology.
True.
So it was just one of those things that I kind of found out about. So it was, still living with my mom, my dad, and my brother, and I was still reading that newspaper. And I remember from then on, I would read the comics, and then I would go to the horoscopes, and I would read my horoscope and be like, wow, that's so true.
It's interesting that you brought that up, because it's like in life, especially back then, we had such a connection with games that we kind of remember where we were and what we were doing with certain games. You know what I mean? Like, we could sit here and say, oh, like my parents got divorced like right around the time of the N64. You know what I mean? So it was like 97, 98, like around there. So like my memories of the N64, I was playing that a lot when I eventually got the system, I think in 99. You know what I mean? But like, yeah, you have like those core memories of like what you were doing at that time and what games you were playing when like you had significant life events from your childhood. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I would say like right around the time of the divorce and for a little bit after, like the main games I was playing were Super Mario World, Gradius 3, and Alien vs. Predator.
Oh, wow. Okay. So your parents got divorced a lot sooner than mine did.
Yeah, early 90s.
Yeah, mine were mid to late 90s. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So we definitely never talked about this game before, though. So don't worry about it.
Justin's picks, I know we've talked about it, and I think there's been a couple other episodes that we have talked about Gradius 3. So we literally mentioned Gradius in the Dangerous Seed track because it is a side-scrolling shmup as opposed to a vertically scrolling shmup. I mean, fantastic game.
Episode 14, episode 35, 54, and that's it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, yeah. We've talked about it.
Yeah, and which also means we've talked about these composers a bunch. So I think we can probably move on from them because we've talked about them once. We've talked about them at least 3 or 4 times.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, let's get into my next pick. This is from a game. It's a newer game, actually. Probably the newest game on our list. It's from a game called Final Vendetta. This is a beat 'em up that came out on the Switch, the Xbox One, and the PlayStation 4, as well as PC in 2022. This track is High Scoreboard, and it's composed by either Featurecast or Utah Saints. Oh man, that was a jam. That's what we're talking about when we talk about high score jams.
Jams, yeah, that was very jammy.
Yeah, that was Final Vendetta, the Switch, Xbox One, and PlayStation 4 game that came out in 2022. High Scoreboard was that track, and that was by Featurecast or Utah Saints. I'm not sure who composed what, but what did you think of this one? I know we kind of said already it was kind of a jam, but...
It was kind of funky, not in the same way that our first track was
the
funky.
Opener, yeah.
Yeah, the
Ridge Racer, yeah.
Yeah, not quite in the same way, but more in like a hip-hop funky.
I was worried about that too. I was worried about picking both of those tracks and putting them close to one another. That's why I separated them, because
that's fair.
I listened to them back to back and I was like, they're kind of similar.
Oh,
but
I didn't
that
think
one
they were
was
at all.
That one was much more techno-y.
Yeah.
And this one is definitely more funk, hip-hop. Yeah, especially with those vocals in there too.
I was going to say I really enjoyed the vocals, like the I Drop Bombs. It made me think of some other songs that I can't remember the names of. Like I have a tune in my head, and it's not the same at all. But I do like the hip-hop vibe that it brings to the track.
Yeah,
I know nothing about this game, so I don't know if that's like in line with how the game feels or what's going on in the game, but it's unique. I like it.
Yeah, no, it was cool. This is a beat 'em up, as I was saying before. So there are so many beat 'em ups now. It's like a dime a dozen. Unfortunately, this one is also like a street-based brawler. So it's very similar to Final Fight, Streets of Rage, which got, a fourth entry fairly recently. So it's another one of those, you know what I mean? So when I saw this game, especially after the other game that was very similar to this as well, whose name ultimately escapes me, and that's part of the problem, I think, with a lot of these games, is they just all play and look and sound the same. And this is the exact problem that we ran into in the 90s with beat 'em ups, where a lot of beat 'em ups were just blatantly ripping off and copying each other without making anything unique or stand out. It's basically like, hey, did you like Final Fight? Did you like Streets of Rage? Well, guess what? This is the same game, but with less likable characters. I don't know.
Yeah.
You can play as a couple different characters. Claire Sparks is the kind of, I guess, visual eye candy. She's a student martial arts expert trying to rescue her sister. Again, almost the same plot as the other game that came out. There was just like a run of early 2020 games.
Oh, River City Girls?
No, not River City Girls. But again, that's I would even say River City Girls is more like Double Dragon in a way. Right. But yeah, or River City Ransom. But Duke Sancho is another character you can play as. Quick-witted bare-knuckle fighter from London. Then the other character is Miller T. Williams, who's an ex-pro wrestler from Canada. And he certainly looks the part. So that's pretty much, these three characters are just going through London. So that's where it takes place. Okay. And they're trying to get back Claire's sister. So that's it. That's the game. It's okay, I guess. I don't know. I saw it and was like, wow, This looks exactly like all the other beat-em-ups that are coming out. However, I'm now more inclined to check this one out, maybe if it goes on like a super sale, just for the soundtrack, because like this song was great, really, really good. And so I'm wondering if the rest of the soundtrack is kind of worth sticking around for to play it, you know? Because if the jams are this good, sprinkled throughout the entire game, maybe that will like uplift the experience, you know?
It could be. It could be.
So Feature Cast and Utah Saints are the composers on this one. Utah Saints is an electronic music group. It consists of two different members, Jez Willis and Tim Garbutt. They're apparently, you know, they've got some hits here and there. They did some club work back in the late 80s into early to mid 90s. They've got a bunch of UK top 40 singles, so it's pretty cool.
Okay.
Yeah. They were like a house band, so pretty neat. They've got two albums. One is just self-titled Utah Saints from 93, and then they came out with an album called 2 in October of 2000. I couldn't find any information on them in terms of like other games that they worked on, so I think they had some tracks that were added into it. I believe the main composer is Feature Cast, who's also known as Lee Mintram or Lee Jamz. So they did a bunch of different stuff, starting off with Jet Grind Radio for the Dreamcast. They did a track for that called Recipe for the Perfect Afro.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Then a few other tracks that they were credited for on like FIFA 13. They worked with the same developer as Final Vendetta on a game called Battle Axe, where they did audio design. And then they were, I believe, the primary composer on Final Vendetta. So, yeah, pretty neat.
But, looks like Janine is telling us we have another caller on the regular XVGM radio hotline.
Cool.
So, why don't you go ahead and pass that on over to us.
XVGM Radio, who is this and what can we do for you? Sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. I only have one semester of Japanese, buddy.
Same, actually.
Yeah.
And that was way too quick.
Yeah. Was that Strider? Kind of sounded like Strider from Marvel vs. Capcom. Hello?
Okay.
Okay, I think that was Strider.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes me want to play the theme from Marvel vs. Capcom, but
yeah,
rather than that, I think let's do something for Strider specifically. We can play something from Strider Returns, Journey from Darkness. Came out in 1993 on the Genesis, and this is going to be high score, and the composer on this is actually unknown. Right, you're back. That was high score from Strider Returns, Journey from Darkness, maybe colloquially known as Strider 2, but the game that's really known as Strider 2 came out in 1999 on the PlayStation, so that's different. This one came out in 1993 on the Genesis. It also came out in 1990 on like the Amiga, Amstrad CPC, a whole bunch of the European computer consoles. And the composer on this is just unknown. We searched high and low and couldn't find it anywhere. This was not developed by a Japanese company at all. This was a US Gold published it, Tier Text developed it. Yeah. They more or less kind of like made the sequel to the original Capcom game. In fact, the box even has Capcom's logo on it, although I can't tell what it says, so I'm not sure if this was licensed or if they were just trying to ride the coattails or how this actually got made.
Interesting, it says USA, Capcom USA in the advert.
Oh, it does?
Online, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't notice that. Yeah, that is Capcom USA. But yeah, they made the sequel to the Strider game, and eventually in 1999, Capcom said, no, that never happened, and made a sequel completely ignoring this one.
Right, yeah. And I mean, you don't even play as Strider in this one.
Yeah, well, you don't play Strider
Hiryu.
You play as Strider Hinjo, Hinjo. Which, I mean, maybe they just messed up the translation, but it seems like a different character for many reasons. The game plays similarly, but there are a number of slight differences. As I said, ported to a number of things. It started out on those European console computers, and it came over to the Genesis, the Master System, and ultimately the Game Gear.
Right, yeah.
So it was kind of all over the place, and not really a great game from what people are saying here. They even changed some things when they ported it over to the Genesis, because the Genesis version had a similar plot, but the antagonist is now the Grandmaster from the original Strider.
Yeah.
And in the manual, they refer to him as the Evil Master. So
very confusing. Yeah. And you're supposed to be rescuing a princess or something like that?
Yeah, princess of like the planet Magenta, I think it said.
Yeah.
Princess of Planet Magenta from a terrorist group that are keeping her captive.
Oh my God.
So the controls are similar to US Gold's home computer ports of the original Strider, so that's probably how they got their hands on it. Is they ported it to those computers and then decided that they were just gonna go crazy and make a sequel.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because US Gold had such a great relationship back then with Capcom because they were porting over so many games to the European markets that because those games were doing probably pretty well over there, they somehow weaseled their way into making an actual sequel to one of their top games, Strider being a great arcade game. And so it's kind of interesting that the way that all went down.
Yeah.
But I think really just Capcom wanted to take back the rights. So that's why they were like, no, this is our IP. We're making Strider 2 for realsies. So then they did.
Strider 2, this time it's real.
Strider 2, this time it's Electric Boogaloo.
Nice.
Okay, so I gotta say, to talk about this track specifically, though, I really like this track.
So with all that,
it was
a surprisingly fun track.
Yeah,
it reminded me of. I want to say it reminded me of something like Castlevania.
I was just gonna say that. Yes,
it has this almost Baroque feeling.
Like a waltz almost.
Yeah. Well, the between the time signature and like that synth is very synthy, but it has this harpsichord feel to it.
Yeah, it's the lack of other instruments too.
Oh yeah, that's
what I mean.
Fair. Yeah,
I mean it really did kind of reek of Castlevania, which I'm all for. So I really like this track. It was cool.
Yeah, it was a very surprised track for me. As I was going through this, like I said, I found this and was like, this does not sound like what I expected at all. And it's just like, this is in here because it surprised me.
Yeah. I mean, this may be one of those examples of like a soundtrack delivery system in the sense that, the game itself may not be great, but the soundtrack is banging. So I'll have to go listen to the rest of the soundtrack.
Fair. Yeah. All right, what do you got? What's your final track here?
All right, final track from me is from a game on the Amiga called Battle Squadron. It also, I believe, came out on the Genesis too, but we're going to focus on the Amiga here today on this one. 1989 was the year of release. This is High Score 2, and it's by Ivo Zor and Ron Claren. All right. Thanks for joining us back on our High Score Jams episode 112. That track that you just heard was my final pick. Battle Squadron was the name of the game, and the track itself was called High Score 2. It came out on the Amiga in 1989, and that was by Ivo Zor and Ron Claren. What did you think of this one? It was a kind of a slow burn.
Yeah, I like it. It's the longest track we've got on the show.
Yeah.
So I looked at the time and was just like, oh, this is going to be a while. Yeah. And it actually went by quicker than I'd expected.
I agree.
I like a lot about it. In the beginning, those note bends were really cool. I wasn't really sure where it was going to go. And it didn't sound like my idea of an Amiga track. So I was like, oh, this is really interesting. Where's this going to go?
Sounded a bit like a Commodore 64 track.
Yeah. And then it got a little bit crunchy as those drums and whatnot came in. And then it like slowly started to sound more like what I expect out of an Amiga game. And then it kind of flowed back into what it was doing in the beginning. It's kind of like some of the tracks we were talking about earlier, where they have kind of these two ideas and they flow between them.
Yeah.
And it was very, very smooth. And I mean, like I said, the biggest surprise to me was the fact that it did not feel like a 5.5 minute track. I saw that and I was just like, oh, this is going to drag. And it didn't. I'm glad it didn't.
Yeah, this was definitely a track you could vibe out to. It was a track that you could just kind of throw on in the background and just let it play and just kind of soak it in. And I agree with you that I really like the two-tiered kind of feel that this track was going for. And I'm really glad that the track did evolve into something else, that it didn't just stay with that beginning part, because that beginning part was a great introduction, but it also felt very hollow, very empty.
Yeah.
And so once everything kind of comes into play, then the track truly evolves and it feels right. So yeah, I was really enjoying this one for the most part. Battle Squadron is a shooter, a top-down shooter, similar to the other game that we were talking about earlier.
Oh,
the Leatherneck.
Yeah.
It's very similar to that in that sense. Or Dangerous Seed, like that. But this one is obviously a European creation, so the graphics are a lot chunkier, a lot bigger for the sprites in terms of the characters and everything. But you're basically playing as a spaceship flying through various different shades of purple and green and spaghetti world. Pretty wild. I haven't played this one, but I really dig the tracks on it. But it is a spiritual successor to a game called Hybris. So you can adjust the amount of lives that you can get for credits from 1 to 3. It's a 1 or 2 player game, and that's pretty much it. There are power-ups that you can acquire, as well as something called a Nova Smart Bomb, which you can use against your opponents. But yeah, it's pretty much, I mean, if you've played, other top-down shooters, it's pretty much the same. Just a, more European style.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, pretty neat. The composer on this one, there's 2 different people named for it. One is Ivo Zor. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. They only worked on this one, credited as the music player, which I believe they just worked on the arrangement for this system, or maybe the sound font or sound drivers. And then they also worked on Viewpoint in 1996, doing sound programming on that on the PlayStation. So the main composer on this one is Ron Claren, who not only did this version, but also the Genesis version of the game in 1990. That's really it. They worked on another game called The Plague, which came out in 1990 on the Amiga, where they're credited for music and sound effects, but otherwise that's really it. So not a lot to talk about here.
Fair.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, then I guess we'll move on to the last track.
I love this game soundtrack.
Yeah?
Yeah, that you're about to play.
This is another one, like I found it and went, oh, wow, okay. So I'm glad that you're already aware of it.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, no, I'm not glad. I wish I could have been like, hey, check this out. But either way, hopefully that means that everybody else will like it too, because we both thought it was cool. The game is Ginga Fukai Densetsu Sapphire. This is a TurboGrafx CD game that came out in 1995. The track is called High Scores Name Entry. We got both titles in this one.
Ooh.
And it was done by Tease Music Limited Company.
Oh, sweet.
right, that was our last track of this high score jams focused episode. That was Ginga Fukai Densetsu Sapphire. Correction, that was on the PC Engine CD, not the TurboGrafx CD. This didn't come out in America. It was a Japanese only release in 1995. The track was called High Scores, Name Entry, and the music was composed by Tease Music Limited Co.
Oh yeah, Tease Music made some great tunes.
Yeah, it did. I
found out about this game from a video I think I watched on it by Mike Matei from AVGN, fame, Cinemassacre, where he boasts about like owning a physical copy of the game or something like that. In order to play this game physically, you need like so much stuff. Really? Not only the game in and of itself, but you also need like a PC Engine CD. In addition to that, you need like a super CD thing. I can't remember, but like you need some additional stuff.
Oh, you need the arcade card RAM. Yeah, because the Sapphire was released on the arcade CD-ROM format due to its enhanced graphical effects.
Yeah, yeah.
Dang.
Or you could just fork over the money to get a TurboGrafx Mini because it was released on there, and that's how I played it.
Oh, the TurboGrafx Mini.
Yes, and let me tell you something. A lot of people balk at the price secondhand for that system now. The TurboGrafx Mini came out a couple years ago. It was like $100 or something like that, right? I think now it goes for about $300, right? But this game is one of the holy grails of the PC Engine CD. This game alone goes for like $2,000, but all the other stuff that they included on that TurboGrafx Mini makes it worth it, because not only do you get Rondo of Blood, but you also get, which in and of itself is like a $200 game, you also get Soldier Blade, which is one of the best games on New Adventure Island. You get so many games on this system that either made it here but were super, super rare on the TurboGrafx. You get a bunch of PC Engine games that also go for stupid prices. So if the grand total of those games now, if you were to hunt them down for the actual systems that they were released on, let's say ballpark $10,000, you're spending $300 to play these games legally versus $10,000.
And see, there's the rub. I don't care about legality.
Right, I know.
I will just emulate them and play them for free.
Right.
I'm not spending $300, let alone $10,000.
I get it. I'm just saying.
Not to mention just like the scalpers, the people that go out and buy a bunch of these things just so that they can resell them at a higher price. That is the scummiest thing that anybody does on this planet.
Right,
and
right.
I hate scalpers.
No, I hear you. I hear you. I mean,
triple the. I get it. They made a limited run, but like
they did.
No.
Yeah.
If you missed it, I'm sorry. Don't shell out that much money.
Oh yeah, for sure, legit. I mean, emulate the crap out of all this stuff. I'm just so happy to be lucky, and my awesome wife bought it for me as like a Valentine's Day gift, or no, it was a Father's Day gift one year.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's super cool. It's a really fun shooter, so I highly recommend you check it out. Mostly because of the music.
Yeah.
The music is incredible.
The soundtrack to this game. So, high score tracks are not usually very long. Your last track notwithstanding.
Right.
This track does not do the rest of the soundtrack justice. I highly encourage folks to go check out the rest of the soundtrack. You can find that on YouTube and many other places.
Yes.
It's phenomenal.
It's so good. Tease Music has done other games as far as like the soundtracks, like Gate of Thunder, Lords of Thunder, and they did Galaxy Fräulein Una series as well. They also did the Final Fight CD, the soundtrack to that too.
Oh,
which has a really groovy soundtrack. It's pretty good. So their music is so good. Really, really highly recommend checking out this soundtrack. Awesome stuff. I really dig it. But yeah, this game in and of itself is like a. If I recall, it's like a shmup that.
Yes, it's a vertically scrolling shoot 'em up, and
playing as all women, if I recall.
Yes,
right?
Yes, it looks really cool. I haven't seen anything other than like the actual gameplay, so I don't know how crazy it gets between levels. But yeah, it's a 2D vertically scrolling shmup. The story takes place in 2092, so right around the corner.
Of course,
time travel is common across society, and terrorists have taken to stashing weapons in like the past.
Oh,
so there's this police force that's created, like you said, composed solely of women as a counter to these terrorists. And the story of this game follows this force and their efforts to chase down one particularly crazy criminal through time. So there are 5 levels taking place at a futuristic city, the Middle Ages, ancient Egypt, and Japan, and finally outer space. So there are 4 characters, four women you can choose to play as. Each one of them has their own ship that has a unique like movement speed and 3 special weapons.
Yeah.
And some of the weapons are you got like a straight shot, wide angle, rear facing shot, classic. You can power it up with colored gems that you can pick up. When you power them up, you get the pods that fly next to you. There's like a shield almost. They're also the things that release like the powerful charge shots and whatnot. Difficulty is adjustable. You can give yourself up to 9 credits total in the game option. So I'm guessing that's 9 continues, not 9 lives.
Yeah, most likely. This game got a very, very late release on the PC Engine CD, and so that's the reason why it's going for such buku bucks.
It didn't sell a whole lot, I'm guessing.
Just low print run, and it didn't sell extremely well. So yeah, the copies that were floating out there. This is also a highly bootlegged game too, so getting an actual realistically legit copy of it was very difficult, like in the 2000s and later. So the game did get a re-release on the PSP in like a little compilation that came out a while back. But again, that also goes for crazy money, like $300-$400 or something like that. So yeah, no, you're better off just emulating it, or if you really, really need to physically own it in some physical capacity, the TurboGrafx Mini is probably your best bet.
All right.
Yeah.
So I guess that brings us to the part of the episode where we pick our favorite tracks.
Ooh, this is going to be tough. This is going to be tough.
Yeah, I'll go first. I really enjoyed the Spider-Man X-Men Arcade's Revenge track. I mean, that's a good soundtrack to begin with, so like that was kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Ryan's pick, Kirby's Pinball, was as I said when we played it, it was a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
It was very light and breezy, and I really enjoyed how that changed things up. Your Final Vendetta track was pretty cool, too.
Yeah, I like that one, too. I'm going to go with your Strider track.
That was a surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll allow it.
Yeah, that was really cool, and I was really digging that. Final Vendetta of my tracks was probably my favorite. That was a lot of fun to listen to, and really reminded me of something that like our buddy Rob from Rhythm and Pixels, I feel like he would be bopping to this.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. What about you guys? What were your favorite picks of these high score jams? Let us know down in the comments or on our various social medias. So we'd like to take a moment to thank our Patreon patrons, without whom this show's continued improvement would be impossible. They are Cam Worma, Jordan and Anson Davis, Rage Cage, Kung Fu Carlito of the Heroes 3 podcast, Scott McElhone, Chris Myers, Robin Purnell Best Friends Club, Rhythm and Pixels, Brad Austin, Chris Murray, Llama Adam, Marcus Stewart, Nick Davis, and Ryan McPherson.
If you would like to become a patron, you can sign up at patreon.com/xvgmradio. There you can see the different tiers as well. Just $1 gets you a thank you at the end of the show and access to our monthly live shows.
You can visit our website, xvgmradio.com, where you can listen to all the episodes and learn more about your hosts, as well as any of our guests or composers that we've had on the show.
If you'd like to reach out to us, you can always email us at xvgmradio@gmail.com.
If you've liked what you've heard, please consider giving us a review on iTunes.
You can join our Facebook group and chat with other VGM lovers at facebook.com/groups/xvgmradio, where we talk about everything from current game news to sharing awesome VGM tracks or just talking about the podcast itself.
You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle on both of those sites is @xvgmradio.
If you don't have any other social media or just want to try something unique, check us out on our Discord group chat. Links will be in the show notes.
All right, so Justin, we have a few things to announce coming up.
So coming up in just under a week this month, on the 21st of May, we are going to have our XVGM After Dark. This month is my pick. And since I just got a couple of vinyls from Unfortunate Face, we're going to listen to Evo. We're going to give that a listen.
Yep. Where could fans go if they want to check out the XVGM After Dark?
Oh, yeah. So XVGM After Dark is broadcast on Twitch. We usually go live a little bit after 8 o'clock.
8:15, 8:30,
yeah, somewhere around there. And the VODs are available for a while after the broadcast on my Twitch, which is twitch.tv/shock83j16.
Yeah. So check out the After Dark for Evo if you can. Otherwise, go check out Justin's Twitch so that you can see all the previous episodes, or the ones that are still up at this point, because I believe that they do auto.
Yeah, they do cycle out unless I do something to prevent that, which I don't. So.
Yeah. Cool.
And then next month, getting into the month of June, we're gonna check out a game called Robots on the Game Boy Advance and DS.
Yeah, this is going to be a single game spotlight where we're going to really kind of look into the amazing tunes from this GBA game. It also came out on the DS with the same soundtrack, I believe. So, yeah, we're going to give it a listen.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. The movie was fun.
Yeah, it's based on the movie. So if you haven't heard it yet, go check out the game. It's available at a very inexpensive price, I believe. Still, you could find it for a couple dollars in most game stores. It's well worth diving into.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is Mike
and Justin
signing off for XVGM Radio. Let's move on to your next pick, and it's definitely from a game you've never played before. Right.
I actually hadn't heard about this game until we started doing this episode.
Yeah.
So this is we really have to stop doing this joke. It's like every time I do it, I want to just jump out a window.
Yeah.
Like,
but there's no windows down here.
Yeah, I know.
So you're trapped.
You really got me.
You're in here. You ever see Watchmen?
Yes.
I'm
not stuck in here with you.
You're stuck in here with me. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, it's true. So this is Gradius 3.
A blind listen.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
No,
that's how it makes me feel too.
Yeah, only after hearing the other version.
Yeah.